So for the second talk of the day, I'm super proud to welcome Ramatoulaye Diallo. I met Rama last year in Dakar, Senegal, and during a workshop. And when she came in the room, I was immediately impressed by her presence and her natural charisma. Really, she's one of these kind of leaders. And I already knew that she was a driving force of innovation in Africa. But actually, when I received her bio, while preparing the conference, I realized exactly who she is. So Ramatoulaye Diallo is the CEO of Orange Money in Senegal, and she's the director of mobile financial services of the Sonatel cluster across 5 countries. Her mission is to create services, communities, and products that are used daily by millions of people in Africa. Her career started on Wall Street in the traditional banking industry, and later Rama has been a driving force in promoting inclusion, economic growth, and entrepreneurship in Nigeria, South Africa, and of course, Senegal. So from Dakar, Senegal, make some noise for Rama Diallo.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Welcome, Rama.
Thank you. Hi, Steph. Very good to see you. Good to see everyone. Thank you. All right. Are we good with the sound and everything? It's
all good. All good. The crowd is yours.
Excellent. All right. So let me start. This is a Swiss event, so we can't afford to have any issues with time. We would not be on brand if we did that. So I'm extremely pleased to be here today. Thank you, Steph, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to share what my team and I do in Senegal, and also, talk a little bit about Orange Money across the continent. But before that, I will just let you know that I plan to kind of talk across a few slides and very quickly and get to the point where we can actually engage and have a conversation and answer questions. And I hope that some of you in the audience might even be able to share some insights as far as designing and creating products for large numbers of people, more specifically also for the African continent. So I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation and slide through it quickly. Let me know if there's any issue, but I'm just going to power through it otherwise. So Steph, let me know if everything is good.
All good.
Excellent. So I want to talk about consumer-driven innovation and designing for impact. Impact for me, I define as really touching the lives of people in a way that is meaningful. So answering real problems, solving real issues, or unearthing real opportunities and making their lives easier, essentially, as far as I'm concerned, as much as possible across the continent and obviously across the world every time possible. So there are three sort of parts to this presentation, and it's all about journeys. That's really the theme that's inspired me today. We talk a lot about customer journeys and use cases. As far as I'm concerned, every use case is a story, and that's where every product, every innovation really comes from. It's 11 p.m. You don't have electricity. You need to buy prepaid electricity, which is a thing for those of you who live in places that get bills. We do have bills, but prepaid electricity, prepaid phone credit is a very real thing across the continent, and we can talk a little bit more about that. So I'll very briefly touch on my own journey because I think it's relevant to me being able to talk about these issues to you. And by way of introduction, we'll focus on the mobile money journey and then talk about obviously what is, in my view, hard to avoid, which is where to from here, given the incredible sort of change of direction or interruption we've had this year with COVID, depending on how you look at it. So for my personal journey, just in 3 short steps, my formative years were spent here in Senegal, where I was born and raised, and I'm from Senegal. So I've kind of come full circle, speaking of journeys, in coming back here about 2.5 years ago to run mobile money for Orange. So having grown up in this environment, culturally, in every way possible, I went to the United States to finish essentially secondary school, do my first, second degrees, and my first job on Wall Street, as well as in private equity. So very much sort of fell in the bucket of finance really early on, but always with an eye on emerging markets. So I was doing M&A for mergers and acquisitions for financial services, banks, insurance companies in Latin America. Then second part of my early career, investing really around 2000 in what turned out to be really a lot, the beginning of the mobile revolution and some of the older technologies. So post business school, which was in 2004, I came back to the continent, and very quickly, that's sort of the last 15 years where I've worked in Nigeria and South Africa and then back to Senegal. And I can really just summarize that as working on what I call useful technology, tech for development, tech that actually cares, sovereignty for women. That's something that's very important to me, not just for women, but as consumers, as decision makers. They're a very important part of this journey, and finance for growth. So these are the things that I'm interested in, that I'm working on, in amplifying impact. And in my current role, I hope that's what I'm doing every day. So onto the mobile money story. As with all good Genesis stories, so mobile money is a big sort of African success story. For those of you who know this very well, just bear with me, bear with the redundance. I thought it would be interesting to just go back to the beginnings and talk in more slightly basic terms about what we do, without assuming that everybody in the audience knows about what mobile money even is. Because I think if you are in the first world sort of all the time, very well banked with a bank account, some of these things are not intuitive. So we'll come to that. So essentially, from what I know, this story started in the Philippines as sort of a technology, but really Vodafone brought it to Kenya because they essentially noticed that their customers started sending credit and having that credit being transformed into cash. This is sort of the short part of the story. So clearly customers were already going ahead and trying to solve some of the problems they were having. And what was that problem? Was basically getting cash from point A to point B across our countries. So that was, 2007 in Kenya. Since then, mobile money in sub-Saharan Africa, these are the GSMA end of 2009 numbers. So globally, you can see that, we were over 1 billion accounts, and almost half of those were across the continent. So when GSMA published this report, they said that 2020 was going to be the year where we would be over the 500 million accounts in Africa. I'm pretty certain by now we have crossed that, given the acceleration really in digitization that we have seen with COVID, and we can come back to that. So my point is, we are well over 500 million, and more than half of the mobile money activity across the world is taking place on the African continent. So specifically coming to Orange Money, we are now in 18 countries, Morocco being the latest that launched in January. We've crossed 50 million customers and crossed 20 million active users. And these are the users in the Orange sphere. So M-Pesa is well over 30, I think 40 million customers. MTN is the other big player alongside M-Pesa and Orange in this field across the continent. So all of that to say that even when you put all of them together, we are still probably under 200 million, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 250 million people. So that is still a relatively small percentage of the population on this continent. So to me, as much as this was launched in 2007 in Kenya, launched in Cote d'Ivoire for Orange Money specifically, across the Orange footprint in 2009, it's still extremely young. We're at the beginning of this story. There are still far more pages to write than there are pages that have been written in this story. So what is it exactly? I thought actually we should talk about this because I many times realize when people actually come here and use it, they're always a bit surprised, or they realize that they didn't actually know what it means to have your wallet inside your phone. So essentially, the most basic transactions are getting money into your phone, essentially, and getting it out if you need it for cash transaction purposes. And in order to make that happen, we have the most important part of the business as far as I'm concerned, especially if you're starting, and that's the distribution network. I mean, so Orange has over 150,000. I mean, it could be a tiny kiosk on the corner of the street, down my street there's one, actually more than one, where you go give cash and it reflects pretty much automatically in your account on your phone. And what do you do with it once the money is in your phone? Transfers are very big, continue to be big. So intra-country, inter-regional, and international transfers of money going from point A to point B are still at the very heart of what we do. That is the biggest need, and remittances fall into that. People can pay bills and people can also make payments at merchants, but the merchant payments aspect of the business is one where we still have a long way to go. As I always say, cash is our biggest competitor. It's not the other ones, the other people in the market. Cash continues to be our biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis, which is something important to keep in mind when we're talking about designing products and solutions. That's who we are up against in terms of being reliable, being quick, maybe not as secure, but easily, sort of value easily transferred. So just a few key points. This is not exhaustive, and we can talk a little bit more about why it's been an African success story. I believe it's because it was actually something that picked up on what the customer was already trying to do, which is move money from point A to point B. And prior to that, they were going to motor parks and giving it to people and say, "Good, can you get to the village? Can you give it to my mom?" Or however they were getting money across. They were very informal networks. And obviously the likes of Western Union were also here for more formal transfers. So it was solving a problem, addressing a very, very basic need, a very basic sort of use case in a world where banks were not able or willing to invest in getting to the majority of the population. As I said, it was very much driven by what the customer needed. It spoke the customer's language. Actually, speaking of the customer's language, interestingly enough, when Orange Money started, the ads were very techy, so to speak, trying to explain what this means and with robots, and it wasn't moving. It wasn't speaking to the customers until there was really a change in the communication strategy to be a lot more playful, with a lot more humor, with ambassadors that were very relatable to the customer, and with a very step-by-step approach. So short, humorous skits that could really show people in real life situations, showing people how does this thing actually work, and actually going through some part or all of the customer journey in a very humoristic way. And that's where we broke the communication barrier in terms of being able to then communicate with the customer. And that the customer-driven design is also very much reflected. I mean, Steph talked about him meeting me and my team when he came to Dakar, and he actually specifically came to work with us and to work with also Le Pôle Digital. I think some of my colleagues are on this, are connected, and they basically, do an amazing job working with the business teams, with the customer, actually across the whole chain. Frankly, they work with everybody, and from design to actually implementing some of these products. So Steph had come to really kind of help us on one of the issues. We had a lot of one of the issues that was really key for us that we're very close to coming to some conclusions about. And the last point is very important today, and it will continue to be extremely important. And I think it means above and beyond what it says on the slide. So inclusive design, yes, that it cultivates proximity through our distribution network, so very just next door to most of our customers, but also in the customer's pocket, right, via the phone. But I think inclusivity here is also very important in the greater scheme of things, because wherever you are sitting today, whatever you're working on, I dare say that, if it's something that's going to last in time, it will eventually be used by or appropriated by people on this continent. And given sort of the trajectory of population growth, I mean, we are on track to add 1 billion people in 30 years. So we're going to have at least 1 billion people, I believe, the projection is that half the population in 30 years is going to be under the age of 25. We actually have an incredibly young population as it is. So overall, and we've seen it with COVID. They are very hungry for all things technology. They're very hungry to be a part of this global culture. So whatever you're doing, I dare say that they will have to be kept in mind. So, coming to COVID, I have this theory, and feel free to challenge me later on. I've been saying I'm a big cinephile. So I always say that every single movie is about one of two things. Either somebody goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. So this particular COVID movie is definitely a stranger came to town this year and came to town for all of us. So we are still living through it. So some of the things that I've put down are, again, this is not exhaustive in terms of the impacts or how it's changing the world around us, both in our business and outside our business with our customers. So the very first thing is this, sort of accelerated demand for governments, NGOs, you name it. It's like everybody woke up and it's like, we have to pay, we need to use cashless payments. We need to pay salaries via Orange Money. We need this, we need that, and just an influx of demand. Some customers that we've been chasing, some merchants we've been chasing, all of a sudden wake up and turn to us and say, why aren't you moving fast enough? And obviously we don't tell them, well, we've been chasing you for 2-3 years. We take the business and try to make them happy. So the second thing that's really interesting that's happened is that the central banks, the regulator being a very important part of our business, relaxed some identification requirements. And identification is actually one of the heaviest, hardest things to do on this continent for many different reasons, sort of outside the scope of this presentation. But so they relaxed some of the rules for about 2-3 months because they really wanted to encourage as many people as possible to sign up for mobile money, use cashless, contactless payments, and also help in stopping movement, because we were either in a state of emergency, depending on which country you're talking about, or a lockdown of some nature of varying degrees of severity. So when those rules were relaxed, we saw in the signups, interestingly enough, just parity. Parity happened naturally in the number of clients that came to us. So that really for us was such an interesting sort of tiny bit of gold mine that we are hoping to continue to understand better so that we can get to parity in our global population, where it's clear that we have more male customers than female customers. So these are some of the nuggets that have come out so far. And then for the future, for us, again, this is not exhaustive, but I talked about identification, for example. I personally think that ethical use of AI is going to be at the heart of what's going to help us crack this. The good old-fashioned ways of filling forms, bring your ID, let's scan it, or even let's bring all that entire process into a digital world, is going to have to be a lot more fluid. Again, we are facing cash as a barrier, as a competitor, sorry. So we need to get to being a lot more fluid, make it as easy as possible for our customers to sign up or to transact with us as much as possible. I think the next wave, as I was saying earlier, that mobile money is so young, the next wave is diversified product offerings. So we're seeing now the rise of credit. But if you think about money in its very sort of old definition, in terms of, you earn it or receive it somehow, you spend it, you invest it, you give it. Across that whole spectrum, I think we're going to have to digitize in different ways and at different speeds, that whole spectrum, and obviously add insurance products, et cetera, et cetera. So we have started that process, but there's still a lot more to do. And I also believe that that's not going to be something that the telcos, the likes of us in mobile money within the telcos, are going to be able to just do on our own. I think we're going to have to rely a lot on partnerships, which is why the ecosystem is so incredibly important, why entrepreneurship is going to be a key part of what's going to ultimately take mobile money, from the 500 million we're crossing this year into the 1 billion and more users, and really fluidify the customer journeys. And obviously, inclusion is at the heart. I talked about it earlier in terms of being included in global design, thinking of African Africans as being, worthy customers that need to be listened to and incorporated, and who also will be actors, whether it's African entrepreneurs or people like myself who are in this ecosystem, not only as participants, but also as a customer. I'm an Orange Money customer. And I also, as a mother, care about where this world is going. What are we creating? What are we doing that's going to be bequeathable to our children? If I'm not mistaken, I think one of the speakers yesterday was talking about social design and revolutionary design, and really at a planetary level, and really taking our ambitions global, but in a very, very inclusive way. So to me, this is critical. There's no such thing as creating products just for a particular part of the world. Ultimately, I think we're going to have to answer the need, the call of the customer on this part. So I'm going to end on one of my favorite poems, and I'm going to claim Cavafy as African, even though he is of Greek origin, but he spent most of his years in Alexandria, Egypt, and did his best work there. So I am going to just appropriate him for the needs of this session, and just read the few bars you have in front of you of his poem, which I think is beautiful and illustrates where we've been. But as I've said, the journey ahead, the pages to write are so much more exciting. What is to come is definitely far more luminous than what we've already gone through, as exciting as that has been. So Steph, I'm going to stop here, and I hope I was timely, and stop the sharing, and we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rama. We could talk for the whole day about all of this. This is amazing. I have a question. You said that your enemy is the cash, is cash money. How did you welcome the COVID-19?
I don't know if welcome is a word. I don't think anybody welcomed COVID. I think we all woke up and it was like that person who came and didn't call in advance, and just rang your bell at 4 a.m. and so you answered the door and you had no choice but to let them in. So it's been the same shock it's been for everybody, to be quite honest, both in our individual lives, but also across the business. Very disruptive, clearly. Sort of pushed everybody who was able into working from home. But across the continent, we have very informal economies and people with activities that are very day to day. So who literally couldn't afford to sit home and work from home like some of us. So I think COVID was a huge both economic and sort of health shock. As we know, we have a lot of issues with basic healthcare and our health systems. It's interesting. I actually was listening to the president of the World Bank a couple of weeks ago talking about their response to COVID, and he described it as 3 steps. So one is saving lives, secondly, saving livelihoods as much as possible, and then third, he called it protecting the future. I actually really like that expression, because as far as he was concerned, protecting the future was about education and basic healthcare. So when you come back to that framework, saving livelihoods, we found ourselves as a continent, and in many countries, I think, having to, actually, I think this applies to everybody, having to kind of find the right response between the economy and people's health, and where do you put, what's the perfect approach, or what's the perfect mix temperature of this particular mix of water. And I dare say, I think we're still continuing to try to figure it out, because in Senegal in particular, it is, we still have more cases, and we're not at that point where we're on the downward side where we can say we're reopening the economy. We've actually had to reopen. And as I said, we have a lot of informal sector activity, and we just can't prevent those people from earning their livelihoods. So now we have to figure it out moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question is for Hassan.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Rama, for your talk. Very insightful and very inspiring. So a quick introduction. Actually, I'm based here in Hong Kong, but I'm originally from Tunisia, and I'm African. So I know innovation in Africa is really tough. So my question to you, Rama, is how your government in Senegal is supporting you in your journey of innovation?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And it's interesting you're talking about the government. I think when it comes to innovation or tech in our African countries, the more powerful actor is the regulator, unless you're thinking about government in a larger sense, including the regulator. So in financial services specifically, I mean, the central bank is, second to God, basically. It's amazing the powers that they have. It's also understandable because their job is to really keep the whole system, the economy stable. So stability is extremely important to them. So that's why, regulating all the actors is actually critical to them. So how are they? So working with them, I personally think is far more, does have and will continue to have far more of an impact on innovation and on what we can do and what others can do in this sector. I think that they've shown certainly a willingness to move with the times, but clearly technology just moves faster than everybody, central banks included. So we have to work with them. We have to work with them and engage them and communicate a lot with them. In my experience, it's really been about building relationships. It's been about explaining our goals and what we're trying to do and how it will answer the two questions they're most interested in is how do we grow financial inclusion and how do we keep the system stable? Because obviously we've seen what happens when financial crises hit. It's not isolated. It takes down entire countries or entire systems, dare I say. So they take their sort of policing role very seriously. And frankly, a few years ago, I think I would have seen their role differently and as being too rigid. But I do understand now really being here, working on what I'm working on, the importance of the role they play. So I would say to just answer your question very quickly, that regulators have far more of a role to play in our part of the world. Some of them are far more ahead than others, but we can't afford to leave them behind. So we're going to have to continue to work with them.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question is for Sheroun. I'm trying to make it sound like Dutch.
It sounds very sexy as well.
Sheroun.
I see a lot of questions and remarks about inclusive design. So I think you're touching upon a passionate topic with many people over here. So I don't want to repeat all the questions, but my question was more like, that's a really strong ambition to be full inclusive in design. And where do you see currently the biggest challenge or gap that we need to bridge in order to at least reach some levels of full inclusivity?
It's twofold. I think the first thing is just listening. I mean, it is such an underrated skill. Listening to the customer on the ground. I live here, we are here, we are our own customers, and I still think we can do more in terms of listening to our customer, observing our customer, and doing that literally, and also listening better to the data that we're getting from our customer. What is it telling us? What story is it telling us? Where's the need? Where are the pain points? Even beyond the pain points that they actually open their mouths and tell us about all the time, whether it's on social media or directly. So I think really that is at the heart. It's the starting point of being able to be, a lot more inclusive in design. The second part that I also feel very passionate about is, which is why I was actually very excited as well when Steph invited me to come and speak and just be a part of itoday, is that, there has to be more of a bridge, more people on all sides, whether in Africa, living Africa, or Africans living, in somewhere else in the world and working, like Hassan, for example, Tunisian, who is working in Hong Kong, if I remember, Hong Kong or Singapore. But my point is we need to mix more. We need to bring our thoughts and our experiences to the tables where capital is being allocated, because ultimately, you know, the check determines what we innovate about. And obviously, where even decisions are made around, well, what problem are we going to solve? You know, if you are a bunch of men around the table or a bunch of just, you know, African women around the table, the problems that you're going to talk about or the opportunities you're going to see are going to be different. So how about we mix it up? So we are, somebody said put more women in boardrooms, not just boardrooms, yes, boardrooms, but any table, any room. Let's build the tables that are not built yet and invite other people to those tables. It's so incredibly critical. I always say we need more mosquito zapping apps, fewer dog walking apps. Nothing against, you know, dog owners and dog walkers, but, you know, we have more mosquito issues around the continent. So, you know, this is, you know, thank you for the question. You can see I'm just going on and on, but my point is this is actually so incredibly critical to what we're going to build for the future.
Thank you. Berhad, do you want to ask yours?
Yeah, sure. I come from Middle East, and I feel like type of challenges that people in Middle East are facing sort of similar with people from African countries. Lack of resources, water shortage, just to name a few. And you know, from my own experiences, I see a lot of young entrepreneurs, passionate entrepreneurs wanting to make a change, and sort of like sometimes, not sometimes, most often are being blocked by regulations, by lack of resources. So and I've been really fascinated by this whole mobile payment system, which makes it really fast to transfer money from A to B with the ease of few, you know, clicks. So I'm wondering if you have ideas or have plans to sort of like merge these two worlds, like a mobilized system for money transfer with the passion of African entrepreneurs to try to solve problems. Are there ideas to finance these ideas that's come through the channels of social media or any other channels that you are connected to these young entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Thank you for your sort of comment/question. I mean, the comment part is incredibly relevant. Yes, so essentially what I started even talking a little bit about what you're describing, which is, so you've got sort of the bigger institutions, or in which bucket I would even put Orange, or the large fund managers, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got this world of entrepreneurs who see opportunities, who see problems they're trying to solve. So in some ways, yes, there are certain things, for example, you know, I'll talk about Orange because that's what I know best. There's Orange Digital Ventures, which is an investment fund that actually within the family of that fund even has an Africa sort of dedicated pool of money that is there really to invest, as the name, you know, indicates, in businesses across the continent, not just in the countries where Orange is present, that address some of the relevant issues that you talked about just now. So that's one. There are a lot of, you know, sort of, there is Orange Fab, you know, that's all about finding smaller entrepreneurs across the footprint and giving them, you know, some mentoring, some money. You know, there are Orange Digital Centers that have opened in a couple of different countries, Tunisia being one of them, Hassan, Senegal being another one, and the goal is to spread them everywhere. And there's sort of these homes of tech and innovation across the footprint. So there are all these, there's a lot of activity, and not just by Orange, by the way. There are other institutions doing similar things, trying to put money, trying to put mentorship, trying to create and build and support the ecosystem. But, you know, clearly there's still a lot more to do. And, you know, there's certain governments that get it more than others. I think Rwanda comes to mind off the top of my head, where they are trying to attract entrepreneurs by creating, you know, the infrastructure and the ecosystem, both in terms of talent and money, that would attract them to come in and build, or come and create and come and innovate in Rwanda, with the idea that, you know, if they are able to create something useful, it can then scale and go to other countries. So to your question, it has started, it is here, it is happening, but clearly there's still room for a whole lot more to be done, from a funding perspective, from an idea perspective. And I do firmly believe that the large institutions, the big telcos, are not going to be the only ones to solve all the problems. So this ecosystem is actually vital, ultimately, for the customer, and the quality products and services that we're going to be able to give them will not just come from the brains within the big institutions. It will actually be from the larger ecosystem. So keep at it if you're one of them, Behrad.
Next question, Matthias, you want to ask yours? Matthias?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to unmute. Yeah, I was just trying to ask you, so how do you address inclusivity without being exclusive? So some people say that when you try to solve the problems of everyone, you end up solving no one's problem. So how do you get away with that and towards your end goal without being exclusive?
That's a great question. And I see the wisdom in it. I'm not sure. Yeah, Jerome said, good question, great question even. I'm not sure I have the answer, but I can certainly tell you, extemporaneously what comes to mind. I think you're very right. There is always the point at which, we talk about focus, right? Whether it's, I talk about it with my teams. We talk to entrepreneurs about that. Well, solve this, tiny problem. But I think perhaps what is useful is that as you're solving the problem, at least try to solve a problem that you can see being helpful or ultimately being solvable for a large number of people. So it can be a very narrow problem, very specific problem, but it could be this narrow and specific but widely shared problem. So that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, you make a very good point, because the point isn't to design something just sort of vanilla and passe-partout. I think, but it's about doing something specific, but hopefully that can be useful for a larger number. And another way of looking at it is, when you're choosing what to solve for, is to look at something that is painful. That's what I was saying, mosquito zapping versus, dog owning. Maybe that's a bad example. There are a lot of dog owners and dogs, but my point is maybe choosing a problem, though specific, but that is widely shared.
Great, thank you.
Great. Cyril?
Thank you. Thank you for the talk. You started actually with the story about the fact that everything started in Philippines before Africa, and customers were trying actually to solve the problem by themselves.
Yep.
Is that not like a good tipping point for all innovators present today, just to like stop being in a room and trying to think about what should be the next innovation, but get out on the field and have a look about what customers are trying to solve, even if it's in another country, because it gives you really a clear indication of what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was back to my point about listening. But if we're going to bring all the senses in, it's about opening our eyes as well. Like, what are your customers doing with is there something they're doing that you may even think of as a problem? I'll give you a concrete example that's very live, actually. So on the streets in Dakar, these guys who sell stuff on the street. So let's say you go to the fruit seller and you ask him to, you buy some fruits. And I would say 9.5 times out of 10, if you tell them, can I pay you with Orange money? They will say yes. But it's interesting, they'll ask you to do a transfer. So you transfer the money, and with the fees for what you would pay eventually to get the money in cash. So he will ask you to include that for when at the end of the day he wants his cash back for whatever he does. So, but we actually have a specific product called merchant payments that addresses that. But clearly, if you're a merchant, the model a little bit copied, at least until now, on credit cards, there's a fee. So there's a cut, there's a tiny cut. Well, I think it's tiny, but clearly not tiny enough, that comes off the top. So the guy on the corner, that cut, he cares about it. That much I know. Otherwise, he would not be trying to like circumvent it. So for us, I tell my teams, this is something we need to think about, do something about, and think about if we're really going to scale and democratize merchant payments beyond supermarkets to literally the guy on the street being willing to accept Orange Money as a payment, at least in the formal merchant payments, because he's accepting it just in a different way. So my point is, this is a live example of a customer, in this case, the merchant, doing something that he's not kind of supposed to be doing, but I think it's telling us something about our product and its pricing and that there's still things for us to do.
Yeah,
I tried to explain very quickly, I hope, you understood sort of the difference between those two things.
Well,
But,
keep the eyes open. I think that's
exactly. Keep the eyes and the ears open. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the talk too.
You're welcome, Cyril.
I would like you guys to give a big round of applause for Rama Diallo, straight from Dakar, Senegal. That was amazing, Rama. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, sir.
Bravo.
Rama, will you be
Thank
part of the
you. I had
networking
fun.
sessions?
Sorry?
Will you stay for networking tonight?
It's at 6 p.m. I may not be able to. Well, it's at 6 p.m. for me, so I may not be able to, sadly. So Friday afternoon.
Okay,
And I usually have some family engagements. I'm so sorry, but feel free to share while I'm on social media or email, or if you have more questions that come up, send them to me, and I can find a way to get back to people and keep the conversation going. This was a lot of fun stuff. Thank you so much.
Exactly, Rama. Where can we find you online? On Twitter?
So on Twitter, I'm at Tilibo Gold. Tilibo and gold, like gold. Same thing on Instagram, tilibogold.rd on Instagram. And as myself, I guess, Ramatoulaye A Diallo on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to say hi and ask questions. And let's keep in touch.
Great. Thank you so much, Rama.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Great, and we're gonna have a break of 15 minutes, go drink something, fresh beer or whatever, and we meet in 15 minutes for the talk of Jonas von Lunten about Agile and Holacracy. Stay tuned.